Good afternoon, and welcome to this edition of HDSA Me. Today, we welcome Dr. Arik Johnson, Staff Psychologist at the HDSA Center of Excellence at UCLA and Fenton Coordinator of the Atypical Parkinsonisan Disorders Clinic. Dr. Johnson received his doctorate in clinical health psychology from the California School of Professional Psychology. While completing an internship in the behavioral medicine clinic at UCLA, he joined the Department of Neurology doing research in Huntington's disease. Today, he provides clinical services to patients and families living with HD and Parkinson's disease. Dr. Johnson has lectured at numerous HDSA educational conferences and conventions and has served on several national board committees. Today, Dr. Johnson will be taking your questions. You can ask a question at any time during this presentation by clicking on the chat box icon at the bottom of your screen. This will open the chat feature and you can type your question. Click send and your questions will be addressed at the end of the session. And now it's with great pleasure that I turn the broadcast over to Dr. Arik Johnson.
Hey guys, just gonna go quick live here to say thanks Deb so much for the introduction and for having me here today. And appreciate all y'all checking in to this HDSA and Me presentation. So I'm going to duck off just so that you can see my slides, but I just wanted to say hello and appreciate y'all being here. So what I'm here to talk to you all about today is dealing with stress in this time of living with COVID-19. I'm going to try to see if I can get my computer to work. Talk about some stressors that are particular to this very specific time in the world that we're living in. I want to include specific considerations for people who are living with Huntington's disease during this time. And then lastly, I really want to be able to provide what I hope are some good active tools and strategies for dealing with that stress. So I don't know about you all, but there are moments where I feel like any one of these kids in the picture where it is just becoming overwhelming. Stress is simply a way that our entire system, our body, our brain reacts to something that demands that we make an adjustment, which is true to this COVID-19 era. It can be because of changes that are happening internally, whether that's in our body or our brains, or from the environment, the world outside of us, like this is a situation. And stress leads to physical, mental, and emotional responses. There are very real physiological responses to stress, and there are some very clear emotional and cognitive things that we experience. I want to talk about how this can relate to people who are living with Huntington's disease and stress. You know, it's a topic that I've discussed in other presentations, but I'm going to put it in just simple context here. Stress in Huntington's disease can affect the person who's living with it, right? The person who is at risk or diagnosed with Huntington's disease, but it also affects the person living with someone who has Huntington's disease. And especially during this time, a lot of it comes from the management of Huntington's symptoms, whether they're the movement or motor symptoms that we see, chorea or difficulties with movement or things like swallowing issues, or the psychiatric and cognitive symptoms, which we so often refer to simply as the behavioral components, right? The way that we think, organization of thought, the mood symptoms, the impulsivity, those kinds of psychiatric presentations. Managing HD symptoms during the time of COVID-19 has been shown to be more difficult. Look, not even just managing HD symptoms, living during the time of COVID-19 has proven to be difficult. But when you're doing this while managing someone's care or living with symptoms of Huntington's disease yourself, it can sometimes make things a little bit worse, right? We oftentimes talk about how people's symptoms get worse under stress. And so we do see an exacerbation of HD symptoms during this time. what is going on right now is something that impacts us, not just individually, but on a global perspective. This is something that I don't know about any of you on the phone before, but I was not trained for this. I have no personal experience in this. So this is a worldwide change that happened very quickly and has greatly affected the way that we all live. Some of the things that are specific to living during this time of COVID-19 that are of notable impact are these disruptions to our normal way of life. The concept of physical distancing, when you are out in the world, being conscious of keeping a specific amount of space between you and other people, right? That 6-foot distance that we all talk about. The impact on people's livelihoods, the way we work. If you are working, are you working from home? Are you like me when you saw on the video briefly, sitting by myself in a clinic room, having limited contact with your colleagues or the people that you would normally work with? And even a bigger question, and this is affecting a lot of people, is if you're working at all, and then what kind of impact does that have on the way that you live and your family? Another big impact is school. If you are someone who has children, you've probably noticed a big change in the way that you live your life. Not only are you taking on additional responsibilities in helping educate your kids, but you're also finding that you have them around a lot longer and having to manage them in a different way. And lastly, the social impact. It's something that I think we're all aware of, but I was thinking about this morning with the last time I saw a patient in clinic was, I believe, March 13th. And I think that is the last time that I hugged someone who doesn't live in my house with me. And that's a really long time and a weird social implication that I just kind of was thinking about today and put into words like that. What is also interesting and difficult and complicating in living during this time of COVID-19 is the fact that there are a lot of differences in how we approach this. And we see this between countries, we see it between the states, and even the cities that we live in, and even, from neighbor to neighbor. So there's a lot of things that we see that are not entirely clear and are not entirely, we're not entirely sure what to do. So those can all add to this impact of stress due to living during the time of COVID-19. I hit all these together just because I wanted to talk about it on a bit of a bigger picture. But now I want to take it to talking about us as individuals living with stress during this time of COVID-19. There are a lot of uncertainties surrounding this virus, right? Surrounding what's going on, which is understandably creating feelings of anxiety and worry and panic and depression. I think it's extremely important to point out that these feelings are normal, they're natural, and they should be expected living under conditions like we are right now. Normalize them first, and then we move on to say there are steps that we can take. There are steps that you, the individual, can take to try to minimize the impact of those feelings, to try to ease the fear, to try to work with the worry that you're experiencing during this time. I put mood changes up here, and I hit what I think are 4 of the biggest ones. Anxiety, this is where, the title of this talk of stress comes into play. Depression, feeling down, feeling kind of hopeless. That is a normal and understandable emotional and mood response right now. This feeling of helplessness. There's a lot of language out there talking about how we're fighting this disease and, wartime this and that. And it's really hard to fight something that you can't see. And we don't know what it's doing to us. So there's a lot of helplessness that people are reporting. And the feeling of loss. And this is something I think we should give some time to, because there's a lot of things that we are missing out on by the life changes we've made to live during this time of COVID-19. I just went to my nephew's virtual graduation last weekend, where we all were watching him walk across his deck in the backyard in his cap and gown because his college graduation was canceled. Last weekend being Mother's Day, not able to take mom out for brunch, not able to visit, not able to give her that hug that we might do in person. Weddings, other big things that we would plan, we're not able to participate in the same way. And lastly, and this is something that I've noted just having lost some patients and friends in the last couple of weeks, we're not able to mourn and recognize or celebrate the lives of people we know who have died during this time, be it from COVID-19 or something else. We're not able to do those things that we're used to doing in the way that we're used to doing. And there is a sense of loss due to that. Some other things with loss are planned, things that we had planned, right? Who had a spring break canceled, or who had a summer trip that they had planned, or the thought of all of us being able to meet in New Orleans for convention. Those are all very real losses, and we do react to those. And then just the day-to-day activities, going to Target on a whim because you wanted something, not because you kind of took note of things for 2 weeks and then tried to figure out what's the best time to go to minimize your exposure to other people. Just the loss of our normal way of doing, the quote unquote normal way of doing things, or these day-to-day activities that we would normally engage in. I pulled fear out as kind of a standalone emotional response to COVID-19 because I think it is important to say that this is something that is very real and, again, understandable. COVID-19 is something that is life-threatening. People are dying from contracting this virus. So to be afraid of it is understandable and realistic. But that fear can lead to compounded emotional responses like anxiety, worry, or even panic sometimes, which is a heightened version of anxiety, if you will, that has some physiological ramifications, right? If anyone has ever had a panic attack and you know what it's like to not be able to catch your breath, we see more of those things occurring right now because of this. This is heightened by concerns we have about others. I used the analogy of going to Target, and I'm not going to lie, I used to like going to Target, and now it's something that causes me a little bit of stress as I'm walking down the aisle and I see someone coming at me and I'm thinking, wow, why aren't they wearing a mask? Or you hear someone cough a couple of rows over. These things trigger anxiety, panic, fear. We can get those from people we know. We can get them from people we don't know, right? The stranger on the street who's not wearing a mask, or the person that you've never seen in the neighborhood before. These are all, again, normal and understandable responses, but they do trigger an emotional response of fear and anxiety. And also concerns about yourself. I don't know about anyone who's listening to this right now, but if you've ever had a coughing spell in the middle of the night in the last couple of weeks, I bet you think about it differently than you did pre-COVID-19. We worry about our potential to get sick. We worry about the possibility that we have been exposed to this virus and what impact it might have, if we have been, on our family and loved ones. Another emotional response that I pulled out is loneliness. One of the big changes that we have experienced with COVID-19 is this physical distancing phenomena, or safer at home, or quarantine. Choose the terminology that best fits where you are, and know that what it boils down to is we have drastically decreased the amount of time that we spend connecting with other people in face-to-face situations. We're not going next door and checking in with our neighbor and borrowing a cup of sugar, or sitting down on the porch and having a coffee or anything like that. We have begun to practice this minimization of human contact. And that can lead us to feel disconnected, right? We're not having those planned exchanges, like I said, running out to dinner with friends or grabbing drinks with people after work, or even going to your doctor's office and sitting across from your neurologist. This can all lead us to feel disconnected or to feel more alone. And these feelings of isolation, or being isolated, or feeling disconnected, or feeling lonely, have been shown to have an impact on a person's general health. It can lead to some physiological symptoms, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but can also ultimately make us more susceptible to things. It can weaken our immune system. People tend to get sick more when they are isolated and lonely. Another impact, and kind of switching gears just a little bit during this time of COVID-19, is we can see people, even quote unquote normal people, right? Not just people living with Huntington's, but people who are the quote unquote norm, having a harder time concentrating. It's harder for us to focus on things, or to maybe get through our, the list of things we got to do in a timely manner. And it's because people are preoccupied, right? We got a lot of other things to think about. We might be feeling overwhelmed by everything that's going on in the world, or even in our own home. And we can be tired. I'll talk about sleep next, but there's a lot of reasons people are feeling fatigued, feeling worn down, and that can affect the way that we think. Another thing that can affect the way we think is just the fact that our usual way of being, our normal day-to-day activities, are out of whack. And that can have an impact on how we think and process information. I was just having this conversation with a patient before jumping on this video, was the impact of living during the time of COVID-19 on our sleep. We have seen a significant increase in reports of people having difficulty sleeping, whether it's falling asleep or staying asleep. I hope that all of you listening are thinking, wow, that's also something that's pretty normal in Huntington's disease anyway. So think about when you have HD going on, but then you've also got this additional layer of impact. What is that doing to people's quality, amount, or quantity of sleep? We also see people's sleep schedules getting off. And by off, I mean the folks that are usually getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning to get ready for work, who are now sleeping until 8 because they don't have to go anywhere other than to the kitchen table and log into the computer. Or the people who are staying up later at night because they're thinking about things, or they're worried, or they're just bored and they're watching something on TV and say, you know what, why not? I'll just watch one more episode. We see people getting out of their regular patterns, out of their usual routines, and this can lead to the disruption of the sleep cycle. And when you're not sleeping well at night, you're going to see more daytime fatigue. And that can go back to what I was just previously talking about, can impact the way that you think, the way that you feel. There are some very realistic physical sensations that people can experience when under stress. Our bodies react to stress. Our bodies react to being under pressure or being anxious. And we can see a lot of these things that I included on this slide. Why I put these up there is, if you pause and look at it for a minute, those are also a lot of things that we see when we talk about the symptoms of having COVID-19, right? A lot of them are overlapping. So this goes back to that fear component that I talked about. If I'm feeling worn down, if I'm feeling some tightness in my chest, I might think, oh my God, I wonder if I have the virus, which in turn is going to cause me to feel more stressed, which in turn can lead me to feel more of these things. So it can become this self-reinforcing cycle. It's important to recognize that feelings of stress, while they can be pervasive and they can last for a greater degree of time, might differentiate from symptoms of COVID-19. For example, like feeling like your chest is tight or you're having a hard time breathing, that is likely to be more variable when it's due to stress than when it's due to something like COVID-19. Also, what I don't have up here is fever. Stress can change our the way that our system works, and you might run a little bit warmer, but things like a persistent fever are more specific to the disease itself. And this is something that I think is important, especially when I'm thinking about someone who is caring for someone who has active stages of Huntington's disease. Sometimes there is additional stress just because we are home together. If you're staying safer at home, if you're avoiding going out, if you've lost all of those usual activities that you might have normally participated in, be it going to physical therapy or, being able to leave your loved one and go run errands for a while. We don't necessarily have those same outlets. So we're seeing people having increased stress just because they are spending so much more time together. This is only heightened when we're talking about someone with some of those behavioral concerns that I discussed briefly with Huntington's disease. If you are someone who has Huntington's or live with someone who has Huntington's who has mood swings and gets angry very easily, or someone who perseverates, gets stuck on something and just can't stop talking about it, those things can be even more impactful during this time of COVID-19 because you might not have the usual tools that you would use to avoid those things or break out from those things or distract your loved one or person that you know with HD from those things. So we do see that having an impact on people's overall level of stress. And that can lead to very real safety concerns. I'll talk about that more later, but I always want to say it might be scary to hear, someone talking about making sure that you stay safe, but I always want to emphasize that it is an important thing to keep in mind. So now that we're all probably feeling a little bit more stressful, thinking about those additional stressors of living during the time of COVID-19, I want to say that there's some hope. There are ways and things that we can do that can help us cope with stress during this time of COVID-19. And basically, I threw this picture up there because I'm like, I think the takeaway message is we all need to know how to be a mom or a woman, because honestly, they do so much more than us guys, and hate to be stereotypical here, but there are stereotypes for a reason. We can manage all these things. There are ways to do things better. There are ways to cope better with stress during this time of COVID-19. And a way that I want to think about it, and the way I'm going to phrase it as I'm talking to you all today, I want you to think about putting energy into areas of your life that you can control right now when there are things that are happening that are outside of our control. That sense of helplessness that I talked about earlier, a lot of times we feel helpless when we can't do something about something. So let's focus on things that we might be able to exert some control over. I love this one. I know it's a little bit cheeky to put that art up there, but seriously, there are things we can do, some very simple things that we can do to take control over our own health. Listen to the guidelines and practice the guidelines that are being shared by the good sources of information out there. And I'll touch on that in just a second. Things that we can do that are going to help ensure our overall health and well-being, especially related to COVID-19, practice physical distancing. When you are out, if you have to go to the market or if you have to go to the ER, be thoughtful about getting too close to other people, or step out of the way if you see someone needing to get through if they're in a wheelchair. Use your good judgment and practice physical distancing. By all means, wash your hands. I mean, I've been told this one since I was a little kid, and I don't think I've ever thought about washing my hands as much as I have in the last couple of months. But this is a very simple practice, especially when it comes to dealing with this particular virus. Safety precautions, PPE, wearing gloves when you go out in public. This is all great, but most of us aren't great about wearing gloves in public and then not touching our face when you got your glove on, because guess what? You just basically took away the value of wearing the glove. Wash your hands. Wash your hands frequently. Wash your hands well. Wear a mask when you're out. we are seeing evidence that just by wearing a mask decreases the likelihood of transmission of the virus or being susceptible to the virus. It is a block. Be aware of what the guidelines are. Both what are national guidelines issued by such sources as the CDC, National Institutes of Health, World Health Organization. We want to look at these valuable and vetted resources and pay attention to what's being recommended. They're being recommended for a very real reason. It's also important to be aware of what your local rules and policies are, because like I said, there's a lot of variability from state to state. There's even variability within counties within a state. We're seeing that in California, where some of the remote rural counties are opening, whereas some of the larger counties around San Francisco or Los Angeles are staying more tightly under restrictions. Be aware of what is important or what is going on in your community. And I said this before with the example of social distancing. Be thoughtful. Think about other people when you're out, because when living with this era of COVID-19, it's not just necessarily about us catching it, it's also about us spreading it. So be thoughtful of others when out in the community. And wash your hands. I talked about information resources. This is something I talk to about patients all the time, and I put optimize on here instead of minimize because I think it's a more positive word, and I think it's going to touch on a couple of the points up here. It is important for us right now to be aware of what is going on, but it's also completely understandable that too much information is going to stress us out even more. So the recommendations being made by others, not just me, but other healthcare professionals, is try to pick a few trusted resources, stick to those, and check them less frequently. I say check in once or twice a day and set some time limits to it too, right? Not I'm going to go down a Twitter rabbit hole for an hour and a half, but I'm going to watch, a 30-minute news program, or I'm going to read one specific newspaper, or putting limits on it and checking in on a less frequent basis is a way to help manage the stress. Now, some people will say, I'm stressed out because I don't know what's going on, but we tend to see more stress from information overload, especially because there's a lot of contradictory information out there and a lot of hearsay and a lot of, in some cases, straight up BS. So pick good sources and stick with those. Check them minimally and know when to say when. It's important to stop and pause and take mental breaks instead of channel surfing or going through your social media feed. If you catch yourself doing those things, put the phone down, turn the TV off, hang up politely on the family member who needs to download everything that they just learned while they were surfing Twitter. Say thank you very much for sharing, but I've got to go. Put limits on the amount of information that you're consuming. This next slide is pretty broad, but I think it's important to just emphasize these things again. Do what you can to maintain healthy practices. Keep doing the good for you habits that you were hopefully doing before, or learn some good for you habits at this time. I know some of the other HDSA Me sessions have talked about exercise, so I'm not going to get into that. But exercise is a great thing for stress. Even if you just do 15 to 20 minutes of activity, it can help. There are a lot of resources out there available online. You can find exercise courses. I'm going to jump the gun and say, check out the HDSA website or the YouTube site. There are a lot of HD specific exercises out there, but then there's a lot of things that you can find online now just because people are shifting in that direction. If you've wanted to try yoga, check out a really basic beginner yoga class online. Learn how to keep your body going so that you can feel better. This also helps with some of the physiological things that we talked about before too, by exercising. Plan healthy, well-balanced meals as much as possible. If I say that because, you know what, we don't want to be overly stringent and not allow ourselves an indulgence once in a while, because that has a tendency to backlash. But whenever you can, try to eat a well-balanced, healthy meal, because it helps your body do better. And by helping your body do better, your brain can also do better. I will say, don't always skip dessert, because you know what? A piece of cake every once in a while just makes you feel better. A piece of cake is great, but if you find yourself eating half the cake, that's a different issue. Try to avoid drugs, alcohol, and tobacco. In general, you know, that's a general guideline that we'll give in the healthcare setting. They do have an impact on the way that we function, both physically and mentally. I put avoid excessive amounts of alcohol. A drink once in a while is not a bad thing. 5 drinks, more of a bad thing. If you are doing a virtual happy hour with friends, and I'll talk about staying connected in a little bit, and you're doing it within reason, and you know yourself and you know your limits, it's not something that we're saying you have to absolutely avoid, but we want people to avoid excessive use of things. Tobacco, you know, kind of a general thing, but I'm not going to tell a smoker that they need to stop smoking now, because under high times of stress, it's harder to do something like that. But to be conscientious, be aware, and be thoughtful. Drugs, look, I live in California, and people talk about weed and CBD all the time. And this is something that we don't have good clinical guidelines for, and I'm not going to try to lay any down on people right now. But I will say, just be thoughtful, be smart, and if you do partake, just do so in a responsible manner. Do what you can to get good quality sleep. That's a hard one, because we can't really just lay down at the end of the day and say, okay, self, sleep for 8 hours and make sure they're a good 8 hours. Do the kinds of things that can be helpful for sleep, like setting a regular time to wake up in the morning. It's a whole lot easier to set a regular wake time than it is a sleep time, just because there's a difference in how we feel at the end of the day. But if you set your alarm for the same time every day and get up when that alarm goes off, after a couple of weeks, you're going to notice that your body starts to get into sync with a certain amount of getting tired at a certain time of night, just because you're getting up at the same time every day. Exercising helps with sleep. Making sure, try not to watch TV while you're sleeping, although some people say it helps them. Try to minimize things that are going to disrupt your sleep, just so that you can get as good a sleep quality as you can. All right. I have been leaning into relaxation training like I never thought I would. And I'm saying that to you as a psychologist who talks to people about relaxation training all the time, and will admit right now on record, I didn't practice it as much as I preached it. But I have been finding that during this time, doing relaxation training, and especially doing something simple like what I've laid out here for you today, can be extremely helpful. The relaxation training technique that I've described for you here is simply what we call diaphragmatic or belly breathing. And the reason for that is, what you're going to try to do is, when you take a breath, you want to feel your belly expand. And when you exhale, you want to feel your belly contract. This is something that I'm going to invite you all to practice with me right now as we're having this conversation today. If you are seated in a chair, I'm going to ask you to put both your feet flat on the floor. Don't cross them, just have them flat on the floor, your legs just kind of hip width apart. Rest your hands on the arm of the chair or rest them in your lap. Don't cross them over your chest, because that constricts our breathing room and it kind of takes away the benefit you can get from this kind of exercise. Now I'm going to ask you to take a breath in through your nose slowly and try to feel like it's filling up your belly, not so much your chest. So you're going to inhale through your nose, and you want to feel your belly push out a little bit as you're doing that. Now, some people might say, I can't do that. So here's a kind of quick tip how you can better train for that. You can also put one hand on your belly and one hand on your chest. And when you take that breath in, you want to feel the hand that's on your stomach move. And then when you exhale slowly through your mouth, you can actually gently push on your belly, and that helps you feel the belly contract. And the next time you take a breath in, you're going to feel that hand expand. So sit where you are. If you're laying down, great, just stay laying down. And this is really, truly something that's great to help you sleep at night. But if you're just starting to do a relaxation training practice, I want you to practice it in a position where you're less likely to fall asleep so that you get the benefit of the practice. Sit where you are, feet on the floor, hands in your lap or on the arms of your chair, or one hand on your belly and one hand on your chest. Take a nice slow breath in through your nose. You want to feel your belly expand a little bit, and then exhale through your mouth, almost like you're blowing a birthday candle out. Take another breath in through your nose, and then exhale through your mouth. One more time all together. Take a breath in through your nose and exhale through your mouth. Go on to do this anywhere from 10 to 20 times and you're done. You just practiced a relaxation training technique. You just practiced diaphragmatic breathing. Like any exercise, doing a relaxation training exercise, you're not going to be great at it the first time you did it, right? You know, if you want to run a marathon, you don't open the door and run 26.2 miles. You might run to the end of the block and think, oh my God, what am I doing, right? Like my body has given up on me after that. You got to practice. You got to build up strength and stamina. When you do relaxation training, I encourage people to try to do it every single day and try to carve out a few moments every day to do it. Why I like this basic technique, how long do you think it takes to do 10 to 20 breaths? It's going to be a matter of minutes. This is something you can practice as a family, right? Managing a person with HD and a couple of kids at home, you might feel like everyone is moving around at 100 miles around you. Let's all sit down together and try this. You might carve out some individual time. If you are having to run to the grocery store, while you're putting your mask on and before you exit the car, you might say, you know what? I'm just going to give myself enough time to do 10 breaths right now. Find the time to practice it. There are tools out there that are more structured that can be super helpful, and I put headspace.com up there. This is actually a meditation app. I wish I could say this was an ad, but it's not. I just love it. I think it's a great tool. It does cost, but you can do a 2-week free trial just to see what it's like if you're curious. And if you can afford it, it is a great technique to not just learn how to do these breathing techniques, but to do some more meditative work. If you're interested, check it out. It's pretty awesome. If you don't have the money for it, there are a lot of free resources online. There are a lot of videos you can find of diaphragmatic breathing or relaxation training. By all means, search those things out and take advantage of them. They can be really helpful. Next thing I want to talk about is something that shouldn't come as a surprise to people who are living with Huntington's disease, because we talk about how important it is to have routine and schedule when living with Huntington's. It is also important to have routine and schedule living during this time of COVID-19. When there is so much stuff up in the air, when there are changes in the way that you work or the way that you go to school or the way that your kids go to school, or all of this stuff that kind of can set people into a spin, the way we can control it, or a tool that we have to control it, is to build and maintain a regular schedule. So things to consider and things that are important to include in that scheduling. Try to maintain a regular schedule for what time you get up. Try to get up at the same time every day, even on weekends. I know it sounds weird to say that, but If we get up on the weekday every day at 6 o'clock, but then we sleep in until 9 or 10 o'clock on the weekend, that's going to disrupt your schedule. Try to set a time and stick to it as much as possible. Same thing with meals, same thing with bedtimes. And I put bedtimes, but I would also say, think about it as a winding down time. Maybe you want to go to bed by 10, but you're not really tired. So instead of going straight into bed, go brush your teeth, wash your face, turn the TV off, make some kind of ritualistic things like turning down the lights or getting the bed ready. There's different ways that we can prepare ourselves for end of day that will help us reinforce those practices and will help us keep it in a regular and scheduled way. Dedicating some time to exercise. You might say, hey, Arik, I've got someone with HD at the house and we're running around all day long just making sure that everything is going smoothly. I'm getting a lot of exercise just doing that. Or you might say, hey, Arik, I've got 3 little kids. Just keeping them together is a workout. You're not wrong, but having dedicated exercise time gives us a different benefit from the exercise that we're doing. If you have 15 minutes that you set aside to go do some walking in your backyard, you're going to get more out of that mentally than you would just running around after the kids for that amount of time. When it is defined as exercise, when there is dedicated time for exercise, you get additional benefits from it. Making time specifically to connect with friends and family. I talked about loneliness or that idea of sometimes just, the added stress of being stuck home with someone else all the time. Having time to connect with people outside of your house can be really helpful. And making regular appointments to do so, while might not be the way that you're used to doing it, can be a really great thing to do right now. Having a standing time where, I'll call you every Thursday at 4 o'clock. It gives you something to look forward to. It gives you a timeline on your calendar to check off. It's a great way to operationalize, and it's a great way to operationalize these types of contact, but also a great way to help to give yourself something to look forward to, right? When you know that it's out there. Scheduling some downtime or alone time, sometimes that's easier said than done, but try to do it. Try to do it whenever possible. Scheduling downtime can be hard if you've got a family or if you're caring for someone with Huntington's disease, but maybe we can schedule it as a group. You know what? Let's schedule TV time where we all sit down and we watch a show that everyone agrees upon. Or let's pick one night a week that's movie night and we'll take turns picking and then we'll all watch what the other one wants to watch. Having that scheduled time to do something that is not active. Even after I just emphasized how important it is to schedule active time, scheduling some downtime is also very important. Hey, there's 4 of us living under this roof right now. Let's just schedule a half an hour after lunch where we don't talk to each other. Having some quiet time is another thing that can be really nice. And if possible, schedule some alone time. That might be once the kids have gone to bed, once the person that you are caring for has Huntington's disease has laid down for a nap. Maybe it's when you go to do that grocery run and you carve out an additional 5 minutes to sit in your car and do some breathing exercises before you go in. Having some time that is yours and alone time can be very beneficial. And lastly, this is something that's really important to me and I try to emphasize all the time. Use tools to try to help maintain those schedules and routines. Don't just think you're going to do it off the top of your head. Use tools to help you do it. And I got on a kick finding pictures last night, so I'm sharing with you. Use calendars. She is very happy with her handmade weekly calendar. I love a weekly calendar just because it's less overwhelming than a monthly calendar and you can put more information on it. Putting things on your calendar is key. Putting that exercise time on the calendar can be really helpful. Hey, on Tuesday at 10 o'clock, I'm going to go for a half-hour walk through the neighborhood after I put my mask on. I'm going to take the dog out for a half-hour walk. Put it on the calendar so you can see it. It gives you, again, something to look forward to, and it increases the likelihood of you doing it because it's there. It's on the calendar. Our brain works that way. If we see something like that, it increases the likelihood of us engaging in it. That scheduled downtime, hey, Thursday night at 6 o'clock, that is movie night. And we are going to be watching, you can even write it on the calendar. We're going to be watching Sarah's Choice. And she really wanted to watch Beauty and the Beast again, but you know what? It's her night. We're going to watch it. I share that because that's an example that I've heard recently. Having a to-do list, writing things down and being able to check them off when they are done. Our brains love that. Our brains like to see that something was completed. The nice thing about a to-do list and to do like a daily to-do list is if you don't get everything done, it's easy to transfer it to the next day too. So having this kind of operationalized or tangible way of recording things can be really helpful. Timers. I used a picture of a good old kitchen timer. When we are trying to do something like that half-hour quiet time after lunch, setting a timer for it makes it easier for everyone to know, oh, we still got 15 minutes left. I can see it. It's on the timer, right? When you're living with someone who has Huntington's disease, who might be a little bit perseverative, I really want to go for my walk. When are we going for a walk? You said we were going to go for a walk. When is it? You know what? We'll go for a walk in 20 minutes. Here, I'm going to set the timer right now so that you can see it. And if you wonder when the walk is going to be, you're going to see it on the timer. It tells us we've got that much more time before we go. Sometimes having these concrete or tangible ways of measuring things can be really helpful. Now, I just talked about calendars, lists, and timers. If you're at all tech savvy, I don't know about you guys, but I rely on my phone to do all that stuff for me. I look at my calendar multiple times per day. I set timers. I set alerts and alarms. If you are tech savvy or have someone in your household who is, it can be a great tool to help keep your schedule on track and see where things are at. You can do shared family calendars. There's all kinds of things you can do. This is not a tech lesson. I'm just saying if you got it and you know how to use it, by all means. Family meetings. When we put together a calendar for the week, it is good for us to sit down as a group and talk about it. It helps to review, oh, on Thursday, we'll be doing this at this time. Oh, on Friday at 12 o'clock or 12:30, we're going to have quiet time for half an hour. Everyone can see it. It's right here on the calendar. Great. When we have those collaborative meetings, it allows people to feel like they're a part of it. It also is an opportunity for us to review those things. It's also an opportunity to get input from all the people involved too, which we should be open to. It's also something that we can schedule and put on the calendar. Sunday at 5 p.m., family meeting from 5 to 5:30. It's a great way to review all those things and to develop them and put them in place. And lastly, doesn't hurt to sometimes put a reward in there. And I am a fool for putting the picture of French fries up there right now because that's all I'm going to be thinking about for the rest of the day. And I may reward myself for getting through this webinar with a stop at McDonald's on the way home. Rewards help us. They help us achieve goals. They help us work towards things. It doesn't necessarily need to be French fries. It could be reinforcing yourself with exercise. If I get the laundry done, I will allow myself to exercise at 2 o'clock. I was going to do it anyways, but if I tell myself that it's a reward, I'm going to get that much more out of it. Collecting points, doing other systems of reward can really help us stick to our schedules or stick to those goals that we are setting. So I like to think of reward more so than punishment. They're both ways of reinforcing things, but rewards are more fun. Staying connected. Trying to do what you can to stay in touch with people that you might not be doing in the way that you're used to because of what's going on with COVID-19 is important. Setting up time for calls, setting up time for FaceTime or Zoom meetings can be really important because you know, it's one thing to talk to someone on the phone, but we get so much more when we actually see a person's face, when we see the way that they're reacting, when we have eye contact, even if it's over the, you know, your smartphone, you're still getting a different level of connectivity. So scheduling time to be in touch with folks. If you don't have a smartphone, make a phone call. I mean, it's still going to give you a lot of benefit. Just because we're physically distancing doesn't mean we have to be socially distancing. We can stay in touch. Setting up times like family dinners. I've talked to people who have been doing Zoom seders or virtual happy hours or coffee chats and things like that. Those can be really helpful. I put up here, ask family and friends to check in with you. If you're one of those people that's feeling lonely or you're feeling stuck at home with someone, ask someone else to put on their calendar, hey, I want you to call me every Thursday at 4 o'clock just to check in. It doesn't hurt to make the ask. And lastly, don't look at what's available out there. There are support groups that you can join online. I know our LA social worker did our Zoom support group. I just did a Zoom support group with another group that I work with. It's different, but it is better than nothing. And they are available, and we're getting better at it every day. So check those things out. Lastly, don't hesitate to reach out for help. If you don't feel like you're doing as well as you'd like to be doing, ask for help. Talk to your care team. If it's related to living with Huntington's disease, reach out to your doctors, your therapists, your PT, OT, ask for help. Contact a social worker. If you're dealing with negative feelings, if you're feeling lonely or overwhelmed, talk to a social worker or another mental health professional. People have switched to video or telephonic visits. We can still do that kind of work. It's a way to remain connected to others. Check out the resources that are available to you on hdsa.org. You're all here right now knowing HDSA, but man, dig into the tools that are available. Look at some of the old webinars. Look at the other HDSA and Me webinars on exercise or yoga or dance and music. Those things are great tools right now. You can also look at things that are related to care for someone with Huntington's disease, and you can find it all in one spot. And lastly, if safety is a concern, going back to what I touched on earlier, if you're worried, if you're feeling unsafe, if you're feeling threatened, reach out. Contact your local law enforcement, your sheriff, your local police department, or call 911 because safety is important. And it is something that even more so now, I think people are sometimes afraid to reach out or to, what would happen if I call the police on so-and-so? If your safety is threatened, by all means, reach out. There are resources out there. It is absolutely okay to ask for help if you feel like you need it. And that's it. That's all I got. And I know it's a lot, and I don't really expect everyone to digest all of it, but I think it's important to think about what are some of the specific things that are additionally stressful during this time of COVID-19, but also as you're living with Huntington's disease, but then to also be aware there are things that we can do that can help us during this time. And I certainly hope that you got some of that today. Deb, again, thank you so much for having me. I'm open for questions if folks have them. Are we all there? I'm going back live. Anyone else out there? Much as I was saying, there's a lot to be learned from doing these kinds of interactions. It's still a little bit weird because I'm just here by myself in this basement clinic room and you're all out there. Someone asked about a copy of slides. I will turn that to Deb. I think it's something that you guys can record and have on the HDSA website. And if need be, we can put a PDF version of slides out there too. All righty.
Well, thank you, Arik. That was really terrific. I know that I certainly learned some new strategies for coping with the isolation and the sense of being alone, even though you may be surrounded in your community by your neighbors. So thank you so much for really taking the time to help all of us who are struggling during this time, and also some really great strategies for our caregivers who find themselves now without their usual outlets for handling stress. We hope that you enjoyed this week's segment of HDSA and Me, and please join us next Thursday at 2 for our disability webinar with Allison Bartlett. Until next week, stay safe, stay strong, and have a good week. Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.